Darcy and Marty and Molly. Luciarcio.
Nice try.
Yeah.
Audience.
Thank you. And I'm going to introduce John. I'm going to come up and John will start. Thank you, John.
Supervisor, thank you. Do you want your phone?
We just do a just a fire action for everybody.
Please.
Do housekeeping.
Yep. Absolutely.
Just a few housekeeping things. I know Mike's got a lot on his mind. As you came in, the bathrooms are to the left, or to my right, your left as you go out. Fire exits if we have to get out. If you smoke, the non-smoking facility on the property, you have to go next door to the parking, right? So you're more than welcome to look at the station afterwards. And obviously it's brand new, so we're still working on things and we apologize. The lights will turn down so you can see the screen there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So when you're going to turn these off, you have to light back here. That
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is John Steinmetz. Thank you for having us and thank you for coming out. We're passionate about this, but we get paid to do this. You guys are out here on your own free time, on your volunteer hours, and you could be spending time elsewhere with friends and family. So thank you very much for coming. I want to echo the supervisor's sentiment that this is a really exciting time for Cicero. So thank you for coming. We appreciate your time and energy. We want to do a few things with you this evening. We want to introduce you to ourselves and then the process and what a comprehensive plan is, what the zoning code update will entail, and then we want to hear from you. So tonight is more about listening to you than it is listening to us. So we're going to talk for a few minutes, and we're going to break out into smaller groups and listen to all of you. So again, thank you. And then we have a project website that launched today that we'll introduce you to, and then 2 different ways to interact with this process on the website, and Katie will walk you through that later. Next slide. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, if anytime during this evening or during the process, if you interact with myself, Molly, or Katie, we have a lot of experience in this. So this is not meant to be a brag or anything like that. We've already got the job, but the things that we really like to do are comprehensive plans update, probably constitute a third of our work week on any given week, and zoning code updates probably constitute another third. And then the last third is other stuff we get to do. But we do a lot of this across the state and in the Northeast. So if you have questions about, hey, John, what have other communities done in situations like this, ask us, don't be shy. We'll be happy to share our experience with you. And if it's valuable to Cicero, great. If we encounter a new issue, a new idea, which generally happens through these processes, we'll do our homework, we'll do the research and get you the best answer we can. I think collectively, we've worked on over 50 comprehensive plan updates, 40 plus zoning code updates. And we've done about a dozen where we've done both, similar to this, where we've been able to do the planning and the code writing at the same time or consecutively. So that's a really treat for us as well. So it really does help shape the community vision for the next 10 to 15 years in a productive, positive way. So just a little bit of, next slide, little bit of information on comprehensive planning. So before I jump in, a couple of questions. How many people have read a comprehensive plan? Yes. All right, more than usual. Kudos. A couple other questions. How many people here are residents of the town? How many people have lived in the town, let's say longer than 10 years? Longer than 20 years? 30? 40? Okay. All right. Thank you. What was that? 50? All right, let's keep going. Anyone longer than 50? 60?
Turn your hearing aid up.
70? Oh my gosh, 80. 80 years in the town? All right, nice. That's fantastic. So let's talk comprehensive planning just for a few minutes. For those of you that write a comprehensive plan, this might be a little rehashing what you already know, and those of you who have not encountered a comprehensive plan before, this will kind of give you a high-level overview. As planners, we like acronyms and shortening terms. So if I stumble in and say the word comp plan, it means comprehensive plan. It's just saying comprehensive over the next 10 minutes, multiple times gets a little tiring. So for comprehensive planning, what is it? First and foremost, it's provided for by New York State law. to provide the health, to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the public. It provides background and additional information on policies to assist with decision making, and it establishes framework for future programs, development, and investment. So it serves as a guide for town decision making, as I said, over the next 10 to 15 years. So what are the benefits of the plan and the planning process? First and foremost is the statement of priorities. So when you're thinking in 2023, 2024, it'll take us about 14 months to do this process. What are the priorities for Cicero? Obviously, Micron is impacting those priorities, but then there may be other priorities that may have not been impacted by Micron. So we want to talk about all of those things. We don't necessarily make this a Micron only document. We want to talk about the entire town geographically, as well as recreation, community services, whatever the case may be, not just economic development. So this will represent that statement by the town board. Once that statement is made and adopted, then the hard work begins. Then the decision making gets passed along to decision makers like the planning board, zoning board, staff, etc. We hope that there's never a lawsuit with any of our clients, but if anyone brings a lawsuit against the town for any reason, recently adopted, thoroughly thought out comprehensive planning document will help in those legal proceedings to say this was our thought process at the time that led to these series of decisions. This is one we get called about the most when our phone rings about this kind of work, is we hear we need one of these to get grants. And that is true. An up-to-date comprehensive plan is essential to help getting grant funding through the state grant program cycle or the federal program cycles that will help you better position the town for grant funding in the future. And one of the benefits of the process that we've laid out for this project is it does help bring together different people who may not always talk about the town's future, like tonight. Might bring together residents, business owners, property owners, educators, whatever the case may be, various walks of life, to events like this where we can have a conversation as a group. And I'll try not to read much tonight. This is a short quote that I like from the New York State Department of State that talks about, in the absence of a well-considered comprehensive plan, the risk that always exists that the zoning upon which it is supposedly based will be invalidated if challenged in court. So there really is this nexus, this connection, this critical connection between planning and zoning. Well, some of the things a plan can't do, it's not everything. It's the end, it's an end, not the beginning. It's an end, not the beginning of a process. So once this plan is done, we're going to be proud of the document. We're going to appreciate you for your time and energy, but then the real work begins. How do we implement this plan's recommendations over time? These things can take time. Some communities implement their recommendations faster than others, but it's not a reason to always expect immediate changes. Again, for some of the things we talk about in play and how it may impact you, your rate of change may be greater than some other places we've worked in the past. But sometimes these improvements can take time. It's not a substitute for strong action with leadership, which so far my experience with leadership in the town has been extremely positive. You guys are very fortunate. And you should consider this document flexible. As conditions change, the plan should be updated to reflect those changes. We recommend every 5 years, but sometimes it's less than that if things change rapidly. Sometimes it's more than that if things are a little quieter. The key elements of the document that we'll be preparing for you over the next year. You'll have a community profile. That'll be what we're starting on next. That says, what is Cicero look like in 2023, 2024? What are the demographics? What are some of the trends? We're going to translate those into a vision and policy framework that's forward-looking set of ideas. Then we're going to talk about future land use, and then ultimately an action plan that will articulate how to make these things a reality. And I'm not going to go through all of this. It's a lot of text, but it's deliberate. It's just to show you that functioning governments have a lot of things to think about. They've got the comprehensive plan, they've got codes, they've got New York State building codes, they've got development review and permitting, they've got budgeting. There's a lot of moving targets, a lot of moving pieces that local governments have to juggle, and the plan is just one of them, as is the code. So one of the best practices that we've seen, we've had the good fortune to do a handful of times professionally, is to make sure all town land use regulations must be in accordance with a comprehensive plan adopted pursuant to this section per New York State law. So as we're developing this plan concurrently and simultaneously, we're going to be working on the zoning code. to make sure the two are in sync, they do complement each other, and they are consistent legally and otherwise. So let's jump into zoning for a minute. Question here, who here has ever looked at the town zoning code for any reason? Okay, excellent. So the zoning chapter for the town is chapter 210, and when you're talking generically about zoning, zoning is a local law. It's one of a series of local laws. It's not the only land use related law on the books. It's a means to regulate private investment, and it's one of a series of chapters, not just for subdivision, zoning, leash laws, curfews, things of that nature. There's a lot of different chapters that impact how the town is managed. And then if you're looking at what it's not, a lot of times we'll get questions like, I'm worried about on-street parking. That should be in the zoning code. I'm worried about curfews or noise ordinances. That's not necessarily a zoning code issue either. Oh, thank you for that. Sorry about that. That was my. So zoning is for private property only. If you've got concerns about speeding or on-street parking or anything like that, that's in the rights of way. So that's a little different phenomenon depending on who has the jurisdiction over that property. So the zoning is not a catch-all for everything that the town government has to deal with, just regulating private property. Looking at your current code, we haven't done a deep dive yet, but we've kind of just gotten on a high level familiarity with it. I just wanted to take note, it was adopted in 2001. And if you're thinking about, well, what was, has the town changed much since 2001? I'm not here to answer that question, kind of that conversation, but I think the world has changed a lot since 2001. So if you think about just historically, who was president, was George W. Bush, gas was about $1.50 a gallon. More importantly, what are the things that didn't exist? Social media platforms didn't exist. The iPhone and the smartphone that we are on daily, hourly, that we buy, sell, communicate with our friends and family, they didn't exist. So when you think about what the world was like in 2001, it was much more analog. Not saying better for worse, I'm not commenting on nostalgia or not nostalgia. I'm just saying it's a different place. So the code was written predominantly when a lot of the things we use today didn't exist. So we want to make sure the new code reflects how we live our lives. When you think a little bit bigger picture nationally, in terms of what the country and the world looked like, from 2000, the US population was about 280 million. The town population was about 28,000. And I think this is what's interesting. You've got the top 500 top companies, and the top 5 are General Motors, Ford, Exxon, IBM, and General Electric. All of them build things or create product. You fast forward 22 years later, our country's grown, the town's grown in population, but the companies have changed. The top 5 companies are Walmart, Amazon, Apple, CVS, and United Health Group. So you have some retailers in there and some service providers, and 1.5 manufacturers, give or take. So went from a list of 5 manufacturers to 1.5, give or take. So obviously our economy has shifted from more of a manufacturing base to service based and other. So why update a code? Why now? One, respond to new technologies and markets. And I think some of the new technologies I just referenced, smartphones, things of that nature, markets, Micron would be a good example of that. Update obsolete regulation. Some of the things in zoning codes aren't necessary anymore. So let's get them out of there so they don't slow down the administration and review processes and make them unnecessarily cumbersome. We want to make sure that the code reflects changing community values. So whatever Cicero values today, we want to try to incorporate that into the code as much as possible. And then finally implementing a plan or study. So as I said, oftentimes we'll do this after a comprehensive plan, which is good practice. We're doing it concurrently, which I think is even better practice. It's a little slow. I'm not going to go into all the different approaches. I'm not trying to make you zoning geeks like we are. But essentially what we want to try to do is incorporate a wide variety of zoning types into your code where appropriate. A lot of people think about zoning as a single thing. There's actually multiple types of zoning that we can draw from and bring into the town as necessary as in terms of what might benefit the town more than other practices and approaches. So what we typically come up with is what we would refer to as a hybrid code. With your traditional code format, which you currently have today, there's been some discussion initially with the committee and with the town about design standards, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then ultimately blending, the base code that you have with some of the emerging practices like design standards and form-based codes into a hybrid code that hopefully captures the best of all the above. Some of the things we try to do with all of our codes is take your vision, which we're drafting together, make sure we pair the code with your ability to administer it. So with Steve, I think you're still here, right? How many staff you got?
14 staff and 3.
So 4 field staff and 3 what? 3 administrators, so 7 staff. So if you think about the city of Buffalo has like about 30. So if you think of the Buffalo code versus Cicero, the ability to administer code is very different. So we want to make sure we tailor this code to the administrative capacity of Steve and his group and that future capacity, whatever that might be. We want to make sure we capture community character, focus on economic development opportunities, while making sure we advocate for and institutionalize sustainability and sustainable practices. We want to do that while being in alignment and consistent with New York State law. Again, an updated code and plan can't guarantee you won't be challenged in court, but if you are challenged, hopefully the process and the content will survive muster. So in closing, before I wrap up the zoning 101, any code update is about a handful of things. Trying to make the code certain, meaning black and white, very easy to administer, versus providing flexibility for more complicated issues that are coming to the forefront in communities across the state and the country. Along with that goes how much self-administering do you want? Again, how much black and white ability do you want for your document versus how much discretion do you want from elected officials, Steve's office, planning boards, etc. And some, codes can be very protective about the way the quality of life is currently, either community-wide or in certain areas of the town, or it can be more adaptable if you're looking for change in certain areas of the town. So we can capture that as well and legislate that as well. And we do that through a lot of different techniques, but it comes down to, do we focus more on guidelines for standards? And I'm not going to get into that in detail tonight, but I just want to talk to you about that for a moment and mention that's some of the things we'll be thinking about over the next year. So we're going to hear from you in a second, but before we break up, are there any questions before we start the brainstorming exercise? Any questions for me, Katie, Molly, anyone? I know I threw a lot at you really quickly. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to break up into 3 groups. Oh, let's figure out the most painless way to do it. We're going to go corner. We're just going to take your chairs, kind of rotate them around. So I would say everyone here, go that way. Everyone here, go that way. And then everyone here, come up front with me. Just stand up. You can stand the whole time. This will take 15-20 minutes, or you can bring your chairs up if you want. Either way makes sense. Thank you. You're out of my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, do you need writer?
Building that into plan.